I think this past weekend is illustrative of what a great case officer Vladimir Putin is. He knows how to handle an asset, and that's what he's doing with the president. I'm saying this figuratively. I think you have to remember Putin's background. He's a KGB officer. That's what they do. They recruit assets. And I think some of that experience and instincts of Putin is coming to play here in his managing a pretty important account for him, if I could use that term, with our president.
Former Director of National Intelligence James Clapper reacting to President Trump's statement after Russian President Vladimir Putin called to thank him for intelligence that he said helped stop a terror attack. President Trump's high expectations for an end to the Russia investigation could ratchet up tensions between the White House and Special Counsel Robert Mueller. According to the Washington Post, the Trump legal team is heading to this week's meeting ready to hear that the Justice Department's probe is at an end and that the president will be cleared.
Okay, wait, this is the same thing, is it not, Sam Stein, that the president kept demanding from James Comey?
Yeah.
Like, do they just not understand that they keep repeating the same mistakes?
I don't think he's used to not getting his way. I mean, I just think it's that simple. He's used to telling people what to do and then them respecting that. And this is a wholly new sensation for him. And it's partially why he fired James Comey, which led, of course, to
this.
Robert Mueller. And it's why everyone is now talking with great nervousness in Washington, D.C. about the increasing likelihood that he will fire either Rod Rosenstein or, get to Bob Mueller himself.
After what he did, a lot of people around him are most likely going to jail.
Yes.
And chances are good that there may be more coming up because of what he did with James Comey, that the same thing he's trying to do again.
And people have told him, people close to him have told him that the Comey decision was a cataclysmic mistake.
Yeah.
Does he learn that lesson?
We'll see.
I don't know.
Richard, I want to ask you about the James Clapper, before we continue with this, the James Clapper interview about Donald Trump being an asset that Vladimir Putin is managing. James Clapper was not the first person to make that suggestion.
Every once in a while, we just got to stop, and things take your breath away.
Yeah.
The idea that the former director of national intelligence would say that the current occupant of the Oval Office, the President of the United States, the Commander-in-Chief, is essentially an asset of a former KGB guy who happens to be now President of Russia.
It's normal.
That is a stunning moment, and only if we are so super numb do we not say, just holy cow, that we're living in a moment that something like that by a responsible person could be said, and people just brush it off and go on to the next thing?
Every day.
Breathtaking.
As Elizabeth Mueller said, every day something else happens that makes us question, what does Putin have on Trump? Yeah. Every single day, something happens that just doesn't make sense.
No, it's been going on for 2 years. It's a thread. We don't understand what motivates, what is behind, if you will, the benign, sanguine, whatever you want to call it, behavior towards Russia. And that is, at the end of the day, that's got to be at the end of the road here. What motivates, what explains, what can't be explained in normal strategic foreign policy terms.
Well, I mean, you mentioned, numbness, the numbness that comes to this everyday aspect of this presidency. And it's also exhaustion. Again, the Washington Post this morning, Trump talked of rescinding Gorsuch nomination once he was nominated. And the reason, it's within the body of the reporting in the story, the reason he was considering rescinding the nomination is he was outraged that Neil Gorsuch, in a conversation with Senator Blumenthal, indicated that Gorsuch, was upset at the president's constant attacks on the federal judiciary. And the president of the United States, Donald Trump, felt that that was disloyal, so he was going to yank the nomination. The level of exhaustion and petulance and numbness in this presidency on an everyday basis is incredible.
Meanwhile, CNN reports unnamed sources who have spoken with the president say Trump seems so convinced of his impending exoneration that he is telling associates Robert Mueller will soon write a letter clearing him, sources told CNN. But the Washington Post reports that people with knowledge of the investigation said it could last at least another year. And members of Mueller's team have told others they expect to be working through much of 2018 at a very minimum. White House lawyers have told the president he could be exonerated as early as the beginning of the year, after previously reassuring him that he would be cleared by Thanksgiving and Christmas. They plan to ask Mueller's investigators if they need more information before reaching a conclusion that the probe as related to Trump is complete, according to a person familiar with the Trump team's plan.
Well, why would they know?
They don't know. They're telling him what he wants to hear, I suspect.
Oh.
Joining us now, former U.S. Attorney for the Northern District of Alabama,
she would know.
Joyce Vance. Joyce, good morning. It's always great to see you. So sift through some of this, if you could. The pace, first of all, of the Mueller investigation. We know that he sort of has his blinders on, and he's going to keep his head down and do his work however long it takes.
You know, that's a truth about prosecutors. They don't indict cases before they're ready to be indicted. They don't delay them once they're ready. So the reality here is only Bob Mueller and his team know where they are in this investigation. But because we're in the Christmas season, you can't help but think that what's going on here is a lot like these toddlers that you see in toy stores with their parents. And they're screaming and they want their parents to buy them something, and their parents will tell them anything just to get them out of the toy store without making a scene. This presidency feels a little bit that way, as though perhaps the president's lawyers are just, you know, really, you won't get indicted. Please, let's leave the toy store. And we know that. There was reporting last week about the briefings that the president receives, that they try to bury information that they think he'll react poorly to. You have a sense that they want him to stay off of Twitter. They don't want him to do anything that will be additional evidence Bob Mueller can use down the road if there is an indictment at some point.
Well, no one's been successful doing that previously, and he's already had some damning tweets. This question of whether or not he may fire Bob Mueller, it used to be a preposterous idea. No, you can't fire Bob Mueller, to which I think a lot of people say, really? It's Donald Trump. I don't think anything's impossible when he thinks of this Russia investigation. What would that look like if he did it? I mean, obviously, he can't do it directly. He'd have to get Rod Rosenstein to do it. If Rod Rosenstein wouldn't do it, he could fire Rosenstein until he found somebody who would get rid of Mueller. But what would be the implications of that if he ultimately did fire indirectly Bob Mueller?
So it's hard for someone to think about this situation rationally and contemplate how the president fires Mueller, because it would be almost an open admission of guilt. Maybe I should take the almost out of that sentence. Maybe it would be an admission of guilt, trying to tamp down on this investigation. There is some suggestion that a lot of this effort to delegitimize Mueller is so the president will be able to pardon people who are closest to him, perhaps to pardon Jared or others in his family should they be indicted, and that rather than an outright firing of Mueller, which we're starting to see indication that would, I think, lead to an outpouring of people perhaps on the streets, certainly of ethics advisors from previous administrations coming out with strong statements. It would be truly a constitutional catastrophe that none of us really wants to live through, and that I don't think this president could survive.
So, Joyce, on the topic of pardons, yesterday we had a conversation, and several people drew the conclusion that the last thing that the former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn wants is a pardon from Donald Trump, because actually he's got a pretty great deal and things could only get worse for him. You also have the possibility that we've heard of several of these people being tried in state courts where Donald Trump's pardon power doesn't reach them. Isn't the power of the pardon significantly reduced now because of the way Bob Mueller is running this investigation?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Because of the state court, the possibility of parallel prosecution, pardon isn't very helpful to many of these people. But something that I think it's important for those of us who've been inside of the Justice Department and who've lived through pardon processes in the past to think about is pardons are typically used in situations where someone who perhaps there's significant evidence that they're innocent but they're out of time for appeal, a pardon is used there. Or for someone who receives a very long sentence, perhaps it reduces their sentence. This idea that the pardon is now being used as a favor being given to people who are close to the president is really startling to people who've been in the Justice Department for years.
I think also there has been some talk, Mika, that the president's power to pardon is not absolute. And if this president pardons only to obstruct investigations, if this president pardons only to let guilty family members or close associates out of jail, or to get them from underneath a sentence. That will be challenged. That will go to the Supreme Court, and we may actually see the Supreme Court ruling that maybe the power to pardon is not absolute.
The system and all of the rules are being pushed to the limits.
Yeah,
for sure. Joyce Vance, thank you so much.
Sam, quick final thought.
Yeah, well, it would be if it goes to the Supreme Court, then we'll get a test of Neil Gorsuch's loyalty to wrap this all up. But the other thing is, like, there's a separate drama playing out on Capitol Hill where there are bills to essentially protect and inoculate Robert Mueller, and they're going nowhere. And the people on the Hill are acting as if it's inconceivable that Donald Trump would go down this route. And to Willie's point, I just don't know why anyone at this point in time would think that's inconceivable.
I agree.
Okay, still ahead, many economists say that the Republican tax bill will increase the deficit without fueling much economic growth. We're going to bring in a member of the House Appropriations and Budget Committees, Republican Congressman Tom Cole, next on Morning Joe.